Good Sunday morning to you. It is the 23rd of November, 2024. Let's talk about butter because baking season is coming up, and specifically we're going to talk about cultured and compound butters. So what are cultured and compound butters? Let's start with cultured butter first, because whether you culture your butter or whether you use store-bought butter, compound butters are merely butters to which you've added other things. So what is cultured butter? At its simplest core, cultured buttermilk, from which butter comes, is the introduction of lactic acid bacteria to milk, which ferments the lactose or the sugar and creates lactic acid. And all of the milk cultures we've talked about a couple weeks ago and today have lactic acid in them because we're using milk-based products. All processes of butter are very simple. You put whole milk into something that will agitate it, and you agitate it until the fat separates from the whey, or the end product in this case would be buttermilk, but it's traditional buttermilk. It's not cultured buttermilk unless you add an extra step, and that's what we're going to do today. We went over this in our culturing milk episode a couple weeks ago, so I'm not going to talk about it. It's straightforward no matter what culture you're actually using. And in my case, to make butter, I used heavy whipping cream, not milk. So that's the only thing you have to keep in mind, is that when making butter, heavy whipping cream and not whole milk. Couple of notes to keep in mind. All the steps are the same, no matter what culture you use. And if you like the ratio method, it's simply 1 part culture, whatever that culture is, to 3 parts cream. And in my case, I was an extremist and used my kefir culture and buttermilk. Guess which step I forgot? We'll talk about that later on. You want to chill your cultured cream for at least 6 hours, and I suggest you dump it into whatever you're going to process butter in. If it's your food processor, dump it in your food processor and stick it in the refrigerator once it's cultured. If you're going to use a mixer or blender, put it in the bowl and chill it. And the same thing for an upright like Vitamix or regular blender. I suggest starting on a medium speed, and then as soon as you see that everything is incorporating, increase it to whip or puree and let it run until you see lumps of butter separating from the buttermilk. Here we go. It's baking season, so I wanted to make as much butter in one go as possible. So you'll see here that I have a lump, you can see it right in the front, of very thick cultured cream, and I got that by just letting it sit on the counter and drain as much of the way as possible. If you scooped it out, it would be the consistency of ice cream without the struggle. Then I added my second culture round, which was looser because I didn't pre-strain it. I wanted some of that whey to help get the process started, and you can see that lump just spinning around in there. So I stopped it and sort of let the lump fall into that center part, that vortex, so that it would be incorporated in the whole of the cultured cream. Then I let it go or I switched to whip or puree, whatever it is, on my food processor, and I let it go, stopping to check a couple of times to make sure that what I was seeing was butter specks, not lumps of unprocessed culture. I had to add my cultured cream in 3 parts, half of a quart to that very dry lump of culture, and then process it a little bit, and then stop and add this second bit. This process of making butter, if you've chilled your utensils and your culture, should only take 5 to 10 minutes at the most. Usually I hear people talking about 8 minutes, but mine took a lot longer because I forgot to chill everything. My fault. You're going to see a light cue in a couple of minutes. If you watch the center post, you're going to see that whipped cream now break into butter chunks. It happens really fast. There it is. I've sped this process way up, but from here on out, we have butter separating from our cream, which gives us butter and uh, cultured buttermilk. And cultured buttermilk is thicker than if you were just to whip cream past its tolerance and it's separated, you would get a very thin, watery skim milk, to be frank with you, because the fat and the milk separate. I could see that by the time it was taking on my phone that there was something wrong with what I was doing, and without even really thinking it through, the thought occurred to me: this is not going to congeal if I don't cool it down. It's possible and probable that the action of whipping the cream is creating too much heat and it's not allowing the butter to congeal. So I stopped the blender, stuck everything, not the not the base, but I took the bowl, left the cover on, the whole shebang, and stuck it in the refrigerator on my lowest shelf to cool down for about an hour. And then I finished the process, and this is what I got. It might look a little bit like cookie dough to you because of the way the camera picks up light and shadow, but it actually is not much different from the El Ruderoy that we cultured a couple weeks ago and ended up with El Ruderoy cultured milk and cream. I didn't film this last part because there just isn't enough room in my kitchen, but you're almost done. Wash your cultured butter in clean cold water and swap that water out until the water runs clear. And while you're doing that, you're going to be shaping that butter into a roll or a rectangle by squeezing the butter to get all the extra milk out. If you leave extra milk in the finished butter product, it will not last as long, and even in the refrigerator, it has the potential to go bad. You're going to chill that big shape for an hour or two because the heat from your hands is going to make the butter soft and mushy. And then you're going to take it out again and divide it and reshape it for storage or whatever purpose you're going to use it for, including compound butter, which is what we're going to do next. This is honey butter, and I did not whip this butter. I have too many things going on at the same time, so I merely mashed up some room temperature butter with a fork and added 2 teaspoons of honey to it. The little, what looks like unmixed honey is not actually unmixed honey. It's water that seeped out because my honey had to be reconstituted a little bit. It was a little crystallized. And so all I did was put in 2 teaspoons, mash it up, and there you are. Now, my yield for that huge amount of cream, cultured cream that I used, was only about a little less than a pound. It was 13.7 ounces. So that's roughly 3 ounces of honey butter. Now you can jazz this up even more and add sweet spices to it, like ginger, cinnamon, honey butter for toast. You can also add savory spices, and you can add things like garlic and parsley and Parmesan for dipping butter. You could add orange or lemon zest, and jazz that up with ginger or cloves or cinnamon or whatever. You can also add cranberries. You got leftover cranberries, either the sauce or the gel. Throw that in some butter, whip it up, and you've got cranberry butter. You can also make pumpkin spice butter by doing the same thing. A little bit of pumpkin puree whipped into your butter with whatever spices, pumpkin pie spices that you like. I got a little adventurous here, and in the dish is pecan maple butter. Now, maple is a really strong flavor, so I literally put in 1 drop, and it overpowered my ground pecans. I threw a handful of pecans in the coffee grinder and ground them up as fine as I could get them, but it does make this butter a little chewy. So if you put it on toast or scones or bagels or whatever, muffins. And in the bag is my honey butter. This is a pretty quick and easy way to chill your butter down in the fridge, and then you can roll it into a log shape so it's easier to cut. Now, what about storage, and why do this very expensive process in the first place? Let's tackle storage first. Since we've already started on it, the plastic bag you saw can be rolled, as I said, and stored in the fridge. Also, whatever you're going to store your butter in, make sure it's an airtight container if you're putting it up in the refrigerator because of, other odors in the refrigerator. And you can store that for a couple of weeks, however long you would normally store butter, store-bought butter. I would shave off a week on that. You'll have to, every batch is going to be different because if you didn't get the enough water out, then you're going to have a problem. However, for long-term storage, there's no better place to store butter than the freezer. So you shape your cultured butter into a roll or a rectangle, wrap it in butcher paper or baking paper or wax paper, and then store it in another airtight container. You can overwrap with tin foil if you want to, or put it in an airtight container and store it in the freezer for, let's just say, safely a year. But really, butter never goes bad in the freezer in my experience. And it should go without saying, no matter where you store it, label it. What is it? And the date. And if you want to be really, extra special careful, then what date would it expire by? So I made it on November 20th, 2024, and it would expire by Thanksgiving of 2025, in theory, in the freezer. That was the easy part. Now let's answer the tougher question. Why go to all the expense and time to make cultured butter, whether it's just plain tangy cultured butter or whether you jazz it up with other things? And the simple answer is for your health. If you buy cultured butter in the store, if you can find it, who knows how long it's been sitting in the store or how long it sat on a refrigerated truck. At least this way you know you're getting fresh, live cultures in your butter. And by the way, don't use this for cooking because you'll kill the cultures. This is a spreading butter. You may have noticed I never used the word salt, and it wasn't in my ingredient list. And the reason is, for my taste, salt was not necessary because the butter is tangy due to the culture, although you can add salt as a preservative, but use really good salt like Redmond's or pink Himalayan. Don't use crummy salt. And the second thing is that if you're making a single batch, unlike me, I was making a batch and dividing it up, you can add your additives for compound cultured butter during the mixing phase. I hope you enjoyed this and maybe I inspired you to try something new. Thanks again for joining me. Questions can be put in the comments section. I'll be happy to answer them if I can. Do check the link list in the description. God bless you. See you real soon.